Hey, good evening, everyone out there, wherever you are. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast, and I'm just really glad to have you here in the shop here in Canterbury, New Hampshire. Tonight, we're going to talk about sharpening, tuning, and using hand planes. And we'll use one as a demonstration to show taking it through the process of tuning it up and getting a good edge on it, and then a little bit about using it. Now we're going to try to do all this in 30 to 45 minutes, which is kind of a crash course. I'm going to try to hit all the important points, and if you have any questions, you can text them in. We've got the little chat thing there, and if you're high tech and can figure that out, go ahead and chat in your questions, and I'll try to answer them as we go along. But to get started, I wanted to show you pretty much the base planes that I have, and I have a lot of collected planes, like maybe many of you. You can find them at antique shows and in people's garages and yard sales and all kinds of things like that, or you can buy them new. I like to have in my cabinet, really, like I would call them like my starting lineup. These are the guys that I go to all the time for one reason or another for different applications. But I know it would be nice to have all your planes there, but to me it was taking up too much room. So we've got the main ones here, and really all the tools I have here are just the essentials that I go to every day, and they're in quick hands reach. And a lot of other things are in the drawers that are more secondary. But sticking with the planes, we've got, in the cabinet, I've got kind of the mid-range. If you were going to have just one plane, you should have either a number 4 or a number 5. So the 4 is on the right and the 5 is on the left. And these are classic older Stanley, Bailey planes. And you can find these at, like I said, at yard sales or flea markets or antique dealers, anywhere. But you want to make sure that it's got all the components if you're going to buy it, because they can be tuned up to work amazingly well. In fact, I use this number 5 probably more than any of the others. I like it a lot. I've gotten to really enjoy this Lee Nielsen low angle number 5, and the number 5 length is also called a jack, and that's a really sweet plane. But I just find that some of the Lee Nielsen, they're just heavier, like this smoother is really nice. It's a heavier bodied plane, and if you're going to do a lot of planing, there's something about the old Stanley that is just lightweight. It's just lean and mean and does a beautiful job when it's tuned up. But I do love the Lee Nielsens as well. So the longer the body of the plane, as you know, or maybe you don't know, it has a truing action so that you can straighten a long piece of wood. As you eye it down the length, you can straighten it this way. Where the shorter the body, the more it's going to follow any kind of existing undulations in that piece. So it'll skim and smooth, but the shorter body is meant to get into areas that maybe you don't want to true the whole edge, and you just want to work a small area. That's the shorter body will work well for that. And then I have the smoothing plane I just mentioned. That's like the final polishing cut, and that can be set just beautifully for that polishing cut. And I think I'll do another video at some point and just focus on this, because it's a type of tuning up that is unique and really special. That is a really sweet, special plane, and I like to keep that set just for smoothing. So I'll use my others. This is more my utility all-purpose. The low angle will work end grain beautifully. highly figured grain, and it's just a really beautiful tool. So this is a great tool for that. And then this plain Jane in the middle here, probably the least attractive plane, is actually pretty awesome. It's like a massive block plane. It's called a miter plane, and it works really well with a shooting board, which I have on its side, and this whole front moves forward and back, and you can tune this up to do amazing, sweet cuts on in grain and just make beautiful polishing cuts. So those are the primaries, and then of course we've got the block planes, and I love this plane. I don't know the number. It's the 60 and a half Lee Nielsen low angle block plane. This is just a gorgeous, really comfortable plane to use. And I keep this old, I think it's a Stanley. I don't even know. Oh yeah, it's a Stanley, and there's nothing fancy about this one. But I've got it tuned up really well, and I have it set for kind of like heavier cuts. So if I have heavy, kind of quick, rough things to do, I'll use this one. And then when it comes to the finer, really refined work, I'll use my Lee Nielsen low angle. So what I want to do is just show you the elements of the plane, and we're going to break it down, we're going to tune it up, and we're going to use it a little bit. And I thought I'd show you my primary plane, and then we'll do a quick job with the low angle block plane as well. So to get started, we've got to break it out, and I'm just loosening what's called the lever cap. That just kind of locks it in. And I'm going to take out the iron, the blade or the iron. This is a bevel edge tool, so we've got a cutting iron, and then on the other side you have this kind of bent piece, which we'll loosen and take off here. And I just give that screw a little half turn, then I can bring this back, turn it, and remove it without taking that screw out. Now this little bent piece is called the chip breaker, and it sits on the flat side of the iron, and it sits about a 32nd of an inch back from the edge. And that is up like this, so when you're planing, the chip comes in and it curls, so it not only keeps the shavings curling and breaking, less likely to tear out the surface, but it also stabilizes and dampens and strengthens that front edge to reduce any kind of chatter. So it's a really important part. Then the plane itself, we have, of course, the sole, which you want as flat as you can get, and then you have this angled piece here that this is what the plane iron lays on here, and it actually creates the angle of the iron coming out the mouth. And that's called the frog. I'm not real sure why, but it is. And the typical bench plane, standard plane, the frog is set at a 45-degree angle. So that's how this one is here. On low angle block planes, we're more at a 20-degree angle coming in. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is at I believe this one's a 12.5-degree low angle there. So you're coming in much lower, making these really fine skewed cuts, great for end grain where you want a nice shearing cut. So this is a nice middle of the road plane with a 45-degree angle. Now let's say you pick one up at a flea market or something. You get a good deal on a Stanley, and you can see them all over eBay if you want to take a look. And you can find some good deals there as well, at Craigslist, whatever. But you got to really inspect them to be sure all the parts are here, and that'll just take some getting used to looking at them. And it's nice if the handle's not broken off, and you won't have to do that repair. And if you can tell that the knob in the front and the handle in the back are original, that's nice. So all that's good. But anyway, once you get it taken apart like this and you get it home, you want to make sure that the sole is flat. So to do that, it's good to have a piece of flat material that you can really trust to be dead flat. And on that, I've got this, I just use a spray adhesive, and we've got this wet dry paper facing up. So one of my friends and a student, Wayne Johnson, he set this up for me in a class once. It's been working well. The paper I had was tearing up, so these guys take care of me. But we ended up putting on 180. I wasn't sure if that was going to be too coarse, but it ends up being really nice. So 180 wet dry paper is a nice grit, because you need something kind of aggressive, but you don't want too much. And it holds up quite well. You'd be surprised how long this paper can last on a dead flat surface. Now, where do you get something like this? Well, you could use just heavy plate glass if you can find somewhere where they could cut you a piece of plate glass. Something preferably at least 1/4 of an inch, but a little more laminated if you can get it. What I have is a piece of granite, and you can find this at kitchen countertop places where they're cutting granite. It's funny when you go to those places, it's not like woodworking where you can take your scraps and burn it in the stove. There's usually a pile out back that, just think of that, it's annoying to get rid of. Every piece is heavy, and they have these piles of, well, the ones I've seen anyway, have this pile of pieces, cut-offs, that are really not much good. So if you do have one, you could stop by and be nice and ask if you could grab a piece from the pile, and you will be set. And basically that's what I have here. So I've got a nice, this is like 1 1/4 inch thick piece of granite, and those are polished and machined really dead flat. So this is all set up with the 180 grit. So you don't really need to put water on it to have it cut, but you would take your plane, you've removed your iron and all, and you're going to just rub it on your dead flat 180 surface. You can use different grits too. You could have even a more coarse, you could have 150, 100, and then you could have a 220 or whatever. But I'm just going to use this one. And then we look underneath and we can see, I can see anyway, it's hitting all here, here, all around, just a little, it's missing in the middle right here. And when you're tuning up a use plane, you may find that it's missing, little spots here and there. You want to be sure that you're getting some decent contact right in front of what's called the mouth. It kind of looks like the mouth of a ray, like you look under a ray's mouth and you see that little thing. So the reason you want it bearing here is because when you actually are planing the material, the wood, you want that pressure on the wood right before the blade cuts. That pressure will reduce the amount of tear out that you get, and it gives you a less chattery, just a cleaner cut. So that's pretty important. But this one's really close right now. Of course, I've been using it, so it ought to be close. But when you buy one new, you generally won't have to do this. I know the Lee Nielsen's and the higher end planes they're really good. They're really dead on. If you buy an imported one, you might want to check it, but I think you'll find that without too much time, you should be able to flatten it pretty well. If it's not working, you'll have to go to something more coarse. I've even been desperate enough where I've laid it on one of those wide belt, the 6-inch wide belt sanders where you have the plate, and just hold it down there to get it started. And then I'd come over here and refine it a bit. Anyway, you can also touch the sides up a little bit, true them up. and it really will have a nice polishing effect for your hand plane. Okay, once you've got the sole trued up, then you can address the chip breaker, and I just do that by holding the chip breaker just off the paper so that, let me do it over here so you can see better. So now the edge that's going to bear against the iron is up on the paper. I'm just going to move it. That's good. And I want to see that that's polished and smoothed right all the way across. If there's a dip or place that's not hitting, just keep going until you've got it. And that's creating a nice little angle, so when you tighten it back, you'll get a nice seal and good solid pressure along there. So I'm going to just put this screw back in a little bit. All right. That's all we have to worry about right now. I'll talk in a few minutes about the frog and its adjustment and why we adjust it when we put the iron back in. But for now, that's a good primer. So, time to work on the blade. This is really where it really counts. You want to get a good edge on this bevel edge blade. So now there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm not claiming to have the way. You're gonna probably find some people are very sure of their way, and they just might have the best way. I'm going to show you a great way that works, and it's worked for ages. But there are modifications, there are slight differences that you can add or subtract to do this. I want to show you now to tune up this edge. First of all, what's going on here with this edge? Well, you may think, all right, all I've got to do is sharpen this beveled. I have to get this really sharp. Now this one is pretty sharp right now. It's got a nice polish on there, in fact, but I'm going to pretend it's not, and we're going to take it through the whole paces. Almost as if there was a little chip in it. So as if you brought one home from a flea market and you had a little chip in it. Well, we've got to tune that edge, that bevel edge, but a cutting edge is the combination or the meeting of two surfaces, the bevel and the back. And a lot of times the back gets neglected because you're not thinking of it as being important, but it's as important as that bevel edge. So one of the first things you got to do is make sure your back is flat. Now, I like to keep that back dead flat, and you want to be sure that if you look at the back, it's not rolling. Like if that front edge is rolled up, it's going to mess you up where you're not going to get the best cut. So we want to flatten the back and true it up and get a good polish on there as well. Now, that's a lot of metal. So I usually only focus on, about a ½ inch or less that way. But to get that back flat, you use, again, your dead flat granite slab or plate glass. And you want to hold the flat back on the paper this way. Now, you want to make sure that you don't lift up or you'll be rounding it, and you want to just keep it dead flat and move it this way. Now, you can get pretty decent pressure like this, but it's only the force of your fingers down into it. I saw an article years ago about, it showed one of these master Japanese guys sharpening, and he had a stick like this on the top, and he was clutching it, and with his other hand here, you get tremendous pressure, more almost of your arms now instead of just your fingers. But you got to be careful not to roll it. So again, I'm just holding it against here. I'm using this little piece of wood that's about as wide, about 3/4 of an inch thick, and I'm just going to work the back, keeping it nice and flat, good pressure. You can apply a little water on here if you want, but it's not really necessary. So you can see just a few passes. This was already pretty close, but wow, that really it's actually got quite a nice sheen for 180. But we're going to bring it up even a little finer. So once you're seeing the sheen is even all the way across right out to the edge, that's far enough and you're good to go. Now, what about the bevel? All right, so let's assume we do have a little chip. The first thing we're going to do is have to go to the grinder. Now, you're not going to have to do this step every time. Once you've tuned it up, you don't have to go to the grinder very often at all if you take good care of it. But every now and then, when you lose the angle a little bit, it's a good idea to take it to the grinder. So a standard edge plane iron like this, the typical angle of the bevel is 25 degrees. So we want to grind it at 25. Now, you can find that angle a lot of different ways, but one of the ways I like to do is just to check it with a little protractor like this, where you can catch the angle. So if I lay this in here and hold it up to the light and bring it down till it's laying flat on the bevel, I can hold it right there. I can check it, and I'm right at 25. I'm just a little over, actually. So it's not critical that you're right exactly on. I'm almost 26, but that'll work. But what I've done is you want to set your, we're going to move over to the grinder now just to show you this briefly. But you want to set the tool rest of your grinder, make sure that it's compatible to that angle, that 25-degree angle, so that you don't have to change it much when you start honing it on the other stones. So this grinder is set to work well with that angle. So you may have to work your angle a little bit till you get it to that 25 degrees. But once you do, I just usually keep mine right set at 25. So I'm just going to show you a couple passes here. The way I hold it, I just squeeze it so that this finger is approximately, it's perpendicular or parallel to the edge. And that works with my little rest here. My finger helps me keep it steady as I move across. My finger is riding against the bottom edge. And my thumb on top is just going to create nice even push pressure across. So I'll start with a light kind of touch here and then just work to go straight across. And you want to work it so you're approximately square here. I like to actually check it. I found that the sides of this are not parallel, so it's kind of weird. You get like a different reading either way. But you do want it generally square so that it works within the settings of the plane. All right, so let's give it a shot. Oh, I should mention, it's a white stone. It grinds cooler. This one's about ready to be changed. It's lost some of its diameter. But these whiter stones, it's been so long, I forget what they call them. They just grind a little lighter and a little cooler, which is what you want. You never want to blue your blade because you'll lose your, you guys know, I forget what it's called at the moment. I'll think of it. But I'm going to go across without bluing and then just quench or cool it every now and then, okay? Okay, I've got a really nice grind there, right straight across. And I would keep going if I needed to get a chip out and quenching, keeping it square, working my way till I had a nice grind, all right? That's enough of that. Now you can use a Tormac too. Those Tormac wet grinders are awesome. I a friend of mine brought one over and actually gave it to me. He got it at a used thing, and thanks, Mike. I have not set it up yet, as you know, but I'm waiting for you to come do that with me. I'm just so used to my old way, like probably you guys are. So, but the Tormac has a wet pool, so it's a slower stone. It's very forgiving, and it has amazing setup adjustments, so you can get awesome results with that. But once you've got the grind now, you've got kind of a coarse edge, and now we're ready to do our polishing cuts, or our tuning up with the stones to bring it to a polished edge. So I'm going to move my heavy stone out of the way, and we're going to start working right in the bench here for the rest of the time. All right. So now we're going to use the stones to get a really good edge. I've got this little board I made. It's just simple little tacked on strip in the front, tacked on strip in the back. It's probably about 9-10 inches long, about 5 or 6 inches wide. And I tacked in a couple brads in there and snipped them off, so it, once it's on the bench, those just act like little spurs to keep it from sliding around. But anyway, we're ready to use our stones. Now, there's a lot of different stones out there. You can use ceramic stones, diamond stones, oil stones, and water stones, which I'm going to use tonight. Now, water stones are nice. They cut really fast because it's basically like the crystal or the grit. The cutting material is in there with clay and binders like glue, and it's throughout. So these stones, like the lower grits, the more coarse grits, like this is a 1200 stone, usually you keep them soaking in water so they get saturated. And then when you actually abrade the tool edge on there, what happens is you see a slurry grow, and this one I have, it was in the water, but you can also spray on it. You can see how porous they are by how that water just disappears. It's almost like a sponge. It's hard to think of a stone being like that, but it is. And so if I go on the back here, I don't want to go on the front yet, but I can't even see it yet. But you'll start to see a slurry or a sludge like develop. And what's happening is, as you're using water stones, the top surface is, because the bond is fairly light, it will be breaking off and refreshing the surface continually with fresh cutting crystals. So it's almost like sandpaper, but it's like you're getting your paper changed without even taking it out of your hand. And rather than some paper, when you use sandpaper, it gets clogged up, it never does that. It just keeps refreshing and giving you a really fast cut. So it's really the choice of many kitchens who sharpen a lot of knives, and for woodworking, they're awesome. The great feature of it being a fast-cutting stone is also one of its weaknesses, because these stones go out of flat. You want them to be flat, but because they're refreshing so much, you can get like a dished out area, and you lose your flatness, and it creates a poorer result for when you're trying to hone the iron, and it's not hitting a true flat surface. So you actually have to sharpen your stones, in a sense, and keep them flat. So for that, you can use a stone like this. This is made for keeping water stones flat. Or you can have a diamond plate to also keep your stones flat, which is a great way too. You just got to make sure it's a dead flat plate, which is this stainless steel plate. This one is very true and good. So I'm going to use the water stones. I won't go too much more into that right now because I want to get to the tuning them up. But I would suggest having one diamond stone plate of some kind. I've got this one, and I also have a DMT style. It's the perforated with 2 grits on each side. This one is 1,000 grit, and it's perfect, I think, for a starter grit. I love using it for tuning up card scrapers, because when you have a card scraper on a water stone, it digs in so quickly, where the diamond stone is just a nice hard plate and it's easy to use. So that's good to have. And then I'll go through the grits with the water stones. These are cheap or less expensive water stones. They come in all kinds of quality and grade. This breaks down fairly fast, so it goes out of flat fairly fast, but it's easy to reflatten. And this is a king stone, and they're, I think you can get them for about 20 bucks, 20, 30 tops. And that's another king. This is a 4,000 grit, or maybe it's 6, I forget. And this is a Norton stone, a combination stone. It's got 4,000 on one side and 8,000 on the other. So that's one I like to use a lot these days. I'll start with 1,000 grit, either with the diamond stone or the water stone, and then go to the 4, and then we'll go to the 8. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So there's a couple different ways to work the iron. You can freehand it on the stone and just feel the bevel and move it around. But I want to show you both ways tonight. With a narrower iron like this, these aren't very thick. They're just a little over a 1/16 of an inch thick. So it's a little harder to hold the bevel accurately while you're working it. It's a good idea to try a guide like this. These work really well. So for thinner blades, you can use a guide. For the thicker blades, like those that are in this low angle block plane, I mean, that's a full 1/8 of an inch thick, and that miter plane is almost 3/16. It's such a wide bevel, you can freehand those and get a really good result too. So what I want to do is get this iron into this. This is my little honing guide, and I'm going to bring it up to where I think I already have some little marks on the back that are close to where it should be. But basically, what I want to do is you want to adjust that honing guide forward or back until you see the bevel laying dead flat on a flat surface. This is a little angle guide from Veritas. I don't even know if they still make these, but you can establish the angle, has like a 25, 20, 35 here, by using that as well. But this one, I'm just going to get it set to where I believe it's going to be good, because I've already done this with this iron. I've been sharpening it many times. So I've got it in there at about the right angle. I've already ground the bevel, and we've honed the back. So we're ready to go with our stones. First, I'll just hit it on the 1,000 grit. I'll just use the diamond for this. And this will also tell me if my angle or my honing guide is on correctly. I'll just make a couple quick little passes here and then take a look. And I can see, I want to see that I'm honing. I've got a hollow ground from my stone. And this is really good because I'm touching on the heel, and I'm also touching out on the lead edge. So I won't have to do very much. I don't have to take the whole hollow ground out. I just want to see that lead edge get cleaned up. So that's great. It's already touching both. I'm all set up. Now, a couple little pointers about this. One of the things I like to establish on my hand planes is what's called a camber. Instead of just going back and forth and creating a nice flat true edge, I actually like to have the plane, the iron, have a very slight arc to it from the side view. So it would have like a very slight arc this way. I'm exaggerating, of course. But what that allows you to do is to set the iron in the plane so that you've got the iron out, but the shaving just wisps away to nothing as it goes to the edge. Rather than grinding the corners or always having that corner dig in, so you have that, you know, when it gets out of alignment, you'll have like a jagged edge there. I like to just give it a slight camber like that. So when I'm using this honing guide, I'm going to actually push down into this corner, and then I'm going to push down into the other corner while I'm staying on this wheel. This is a narrow wheel, so I get a little bit of give. So I'm pushing down with this finger, and over time, I'll create a very slight camber, which is really nice to have, especially on the smoothing plane, because you want to be able to create a really nice surface without that edge digging in. Okay, that's looking good. I can take, I'll take my big one. I can take a straight edge, hold it on there, and see if it rocks a little bit. And that does, just slightly. I've got a nice little camber on there. I like that. So I'll just hit it a touch more. And that's looking good. Now I'm going to just lap the back a bit. Get the burr off and get it up to that 1000 grit. And perfect. Now we're ready to move to the finer grit. So we can set this aside. And this is where the honing guide comes in really handy. You don't have to think about the set of the angle. And you can move very quickly through the stones. So I've got my 4000 grit here. I'm going to just spritz it a little bit. These can be used dry as well. But the finer grit stones also, it's helpful if you use this little stone. It's called a Nagora stone. And what it does is it prepares and it brings up a little bit of the cutting material from the stone. And so you have a little bit of a slurry on there. It's dried out so fast that you're not seeing it, but it's settling in. So now I'm ready to go with my 4000. And again, I'm just going to use that little bit of pressure. And now, because I'm wearing my stone, I want to make sure I'm using the whole stone. Before I go too far, I want to make sure I lap the back. It's 4000 grit, keeping it really flat. It's looking good. Back up. It's looking good. Okay, that's far enough. Now I'm just going to flip, and we're going to go right into the 8000 grit, and this will give us a nice polishing cut. See, this grain is like so tight on this stone that it helps to create that little slurry. It's almost like a polishing compound that you'd use on a car, but it's 8000 grit. Got a question? Who is it and what? Okay, John, got your question. The ruler trick? Which is that? Oh, I think I know what he's talking about. He might be talking about a different ruler trick. I don't think you're talking about this, but here I was just checking with a straight edge to get the rock. The ruler trick is, my rule is a little thicker than the one they recommend, but I'll mention that when I'm out of the guide, I'll show you right at the end what we're talking about there. And it's a technique I haven't adopted. I think it's good. I may start adopting it, but I'm still kind of old school, and I like to keep the back flat. Right, yeah. Using the ruler on the stone to put a little bevel on the back. I think I can't tell you that it's good or bad. I think it has to be. There's advantages to it for sure, because what you're doing is you're just creating a tiny little polished back. So that effort that I go through to flatten and keep the back dead true is achieved by just a little micro bevel on the back. So with a plane like this, it's fine. It would be fine to do that because it's upright like this. I don't do it. I don't have that thin of a rule, but I'm going to try it. I would say try it both ways. I like it because I think it gives you a purity of a back of a polished edge right up there without any trouble. But I was at a Lee Nielsen event not long ago, and I saw the little rules that they use to do that, and they're like half the thickness of mine, which, I think you just want a very thin piece of metal to do that. I'm going to just show you guys that in a second. I won't do it, but I'll show you what we were talking about. So for now, I'm still going old school, polishing the back. So I'm getting a nice polish. And this works well too. And then the bevel. And I can see that I've got a really nice polished edge going there. And I'm just going to stop at that point. Okay? So now the last thing I've got to do is hone this iron. And to do that, I have used leather strops in the past, and I found that when I would use the leather strop, because they have a squish factor, I was actually getting a little bit of a roundedness on the edge that I had worked so hard to keep really crisp. So I saw this not long ago, that to use a piece of cherry or a piece of wood like this as your strop can work very well. Cherry has a certain density that doesn't obviously give, but it is a fairly soft wood among hardwoods. So what I like to do is take the cherry and then with green jeweler's rouge, just charge or rub the rouge onto the cherry. And this gives you an awesome stropping board. And it's pretty cheap too, which is always good. So you don't need a ton on there. You just want enough so that when you strop, you'll get a good result. Now I'm going to take it out at this point because I don't want to contaminate the strop with any grit that might be on my wheel. So to strop, again, this has a little burr in it. I'm going to hold it flat on the back and draw it back. Just 4 or 5 times, and I've got a really nice polish out there. And now I'm going to hold it up on the bevel and just draw it right back, holding it. And it really comes up to a mirror. Super looking edge there. And that's what you want. You want to have a nice polish on the back and the front. Now the rule trick is to lay a little 6-inch rule, and I would make sure you get a really thin one to try this. I know it works, but I haven't gotten into doing it. And then you hold your iron across, so it's pitching the iron up, so you're actually creating that back bevel on the flat side, which will help a lot because it's very hard to get a really pure polished edge all the way out to the end on this flat edge. So what the heck, I'll try right now. I'm going to just put a little one, and this is a little steeper than the Lee Nielsen one. And this is just with the 8,000 grit, so this won't hurt much. Beautiful. I can see a nice little polish. I'm hardly even touching it, but I can see a polish sheen right along that edge. Now I'm going to go back this way, and we'll just hone it one more time. And there we go. All right. Now we're ready to put this back into the plane. So I've got my chip breaker nicely tuned up. I'm going to bring it in on the flat side of my iron, rotate it around. We're going to bring it up so it's about a 30-second from the end. What's that? Okay, I'm just going to put the chip breaker on the back, the flat. We're doing this again so we can get a closer in view. And slide it up so we're about a 16th of an inch, I'm sorry, a 32nd of an inch from the end of the iron. And then I'll snug this up, and that gives you a nice firm support on that cutting edge. Everything's beautifully polished, and we've got the polish edge down now. Now I'm going to put it back into my plane here, but before I put it in, I'm just going to throw a little wax on the sole. This makes a tremendous difference in your planing pleasure. You will just love this. I've got this tray wax. It's a kind of floor wax, but I've seen people use paraffin, butcher's wax, whatever. This has a little carnauba in it, and I like it. But I wipe it off, and don't worry about it contaminating the wood. It'll never be a problem to you. I've never had a problem with it. So now we're going to put our iron back in, and here we want our bevel edge down. I'll put it in really carefully. Don't want to ding it after you've got that sweet edge on there. And then the lever cap on top, and we lock it in. Now I've got to set the blade, and I like to bring it up above the surface so I can see it. I just hold it so I'm looking down the sole at a white wall, and it looks, I can see it really well off there. So I want to adjust it so that it's parallel to the surface, and then back it down. Now it's slightly out of parallel, so I'm going to push this adjustment bar over till it looks pretty good, and then I'm going to back it down. Now I'll fine-tune it when I'm actually planing, because I'll see right where the shavings are coming out. I want them coming out of the center, and that looks pretty close to it right now. So I'll back it down a little bit. Nice. All right. There. It's a tuned up plane. We're ready to give it a try. So let me clear off this end of the bench a bit. And we'll give it a try on a couple pieces I got over here. I've got a piece of walnut, and the grain is rising this way, so I want to run the plane along this direction. If you think of those lines, that's kind of the orientation of the grain running up out of the surface. If you think of it almost like dog's fur, you would want to pat the dog this way so that the grain would lay flat. But if you come this way, it gets ruffled up. It's the same with wood. You've got these tubes of wood coming out the surface, and if you plane this way, you're likely to get tear out or rough surface where those jagging up. And that reminds me, I was going to say something about the frog. You want to adjust the frog forward enough so you have just a small opening in front of the iron and the sole of the plane just in front of the edge. So mine here is probably a 32nd or less, but if I advance that iron, it gets even tighter. So if you're going to use a plane for heavy planing, like where you're going to be taking, pretty heavy shavings, you'd have to back that frog up a bit to allow the shavings to clear and come out. But I always use this on a fairly fine setting, so I've got it all set up. This is one of those where the mouth opening is adjusted. It's a little more tedious. You've got to take this out, you loosen the 2 screws on the frog, and then you turn a screw back here that moves it forward and back. Once you got it set, I usually never touch it again. The beauty about the low-angle block planes and that big miter plane is it has an adjustable mouth in the front. So this slides open easily just by adjusting. You can dial it right in to make a very fine cut and a flawless shaving. So that's the adjustable mouth in the sole of the plane. Most bench planes do not have that, and you have to actually adjust the frog forward and back. So we've got this dialed in pretty nicely. We've got our grain-oriented well, and we're going to get it into our vise, and we're ready to go. So I'm just going to hold it. I like to be kind of on top of it near my hip, and a lot of it is lower body. It's not as much upper body as you think. So I'm going to lean in, and then I'll come out, and then I'll finish with my hands out in front. Okay, nothing's happening. Actually, I got a tiny little shaving. So this is where you're going to adjust. And that shaving is coming right out of the middle, which is good. So I'll just dial it a touch, and we'll try again. Okay. Now we're getting some. I can feel it. It's a little high over here. On the left side, I'm not quite getting full. There's a little low area here, so I'm skimming all around until everything drops till we hit that low area. But that shaving, you can see, is coming right out of the middle. And if I magnified this shaving, you'd see that it gets thinner on the edges, and that's because of the camber. So we have a nice soft shaving there. And that slight camber you barely notice it on there. In fact, if you put a finish on there right off the tool, you didn't do much, you'd have this very subtle scalloping, which I love because it's really the evidence of the hand-worked surface rather than just a big belt sander on there. So I'm just leaning right over the top. I've got the set really fine. It's almost polishing. I'll make it a little heavier so you can see how wide the shaving can be. I mean, look at that's just a beautiful shaving. It's almost the full width of the mouth, but it goes off to nothing. So there's no edges digging on here. It's just about as far as you can go. So you get now I'm getting the whole surface here, and I've got just a beautiful plain surface. Very nice. So that's a way to flatten a true board. Let's try it on something a little more challenging. How about a piece of curly maple? Now this grain is rolling, so it's a little tough to get. So I'm going to try it on this surface here. And again, I'll dial this plane back a little bit. I don't want to be quite so aggressive. Then we'll bring it forward. Whoops. That suddenly caught more than I wanted. nice. Look at this, is just beautiful. Look at that beautiful surface. No tear out at all. Really sweet. Okay, we got a question. Yes, if you mean by, who is it too? Me. Hey, Tom, that's a great question. He asked, will the camber on the plane iron get rid of plane tracks? And the answer is, I think what you mean by plane tracks are those hard edge, like one edge of the plane iron is digging in. And that's very common to happen because you're trying to advance it. Sometimes it slips a little bit, and you'll see a little line. But if you set it very lightly, so you can imagine your camber is so slight that the plane iron is not exposed there on the corner. And that's what the camber creates, is a very soft kind of tapering away. So it does eliminate getting plane tracks. However, time to time I still get them. One little trick, if you're moving along, it's not a critical piece. If you want to get rid of those plane tracks without adjusting, ideally you'd adjust the angle back off the blade a little bit, but you can plane toward the side that it's digging out of. So let's say I was digging out of this right-hand side, and I'm going to plane this board. If I make my first pass, I would see that I'm getting a line on the right side. Now if I work from left to right, each time I make a pass, I take that out. So by the time I get to the right side, they're all gone. So if you worked in the direction toward the side where the iron is sticking out, you'll get rid of it with each pass, and you'll have a really sweet surface. If you look close, it might be slightly angled, but you don't feel anything on the surface. So I hope that answered your question. But a plane, the camber is especially important with like a smoother, because the smoother is typically the final surfacing plane, especially if you're doing a wider top, and you want to get a really fine polished surface. This smoother has a very subtle camber on it. I don't know if I got it set up at the moment. And it gives you, yeah, there we go, the same effect. I need a little wax on it. But you see how those shavings there just wispy out to the edge, and you don't get any of that digging. And so it's a polishing, finishing plane. The camber eliminates any edge digging, or what do you call them? Plane marks? Plane tracks. Yeah, plane tracks. I know some people just grind the edges round, but I don't think that's a good answer to that. I prefer the camber myself. Okay, so we've planed two boards like that. The last thing I want to show you is one little technique. You can actually plane with a flat plane, a curved surface like this. So to do that, I'm going to show you really quick tuning up this block plane. We pop it out. There's no chip breaker. It's just got a very large bevel here and a nice flat back. So I'm just going to go to the 4000 grit. I know this is pretty sharp. And hold it on the bevel. I'm going to raise it up a little to get a micro bevel. Work your whole stone. I like circles. Boys and girls. And then lay it flat. I'll just hold the back a bit. And I can see I've got a nice mat there. So I'm ready to flip. Again, get the bevel, raise it up a touch, and then travel. Let me get it back here. Now, block planes like this, any low-angle plane, they are typically ground not at the 25 degrees, but at 20 degrees. So they give you more of a, they are the opposite way. The flat bottom is down. So it gives you a nice, sweet shearing cut. Okay, so I've got both edges done here. Now all I have to do is strop, and we can put it back in. That's looking good. Just going to put a little wax on the bottom of the plane. Don't skip this step. If you're fighting your plane, either it's time to tune up the blade, or just throw a little wax on the sole, and you'll be amazed how it feels like it's going to fly right out of your hands. Okay, that's all set. Now I'm going to put this back in with the bevel side up. Lock it in, and I'll sight it along the bottom. Sure, what's the question? From who? Yes. John, that's a good question that asked, can you work a camber by hand without a jig? Yes, you can. You just have to just feel the bevel, like when you're up on the bevel, like if we say here, and you have to work. I like working in circles, and as I'm going, I'm pressuring on the right side here and then the left side, and it takes a little time, but you can absolutely do it. Now I know Veritas actually makes a honing guide with a slight football-shaped wheel on the bottom, and it allows you to create a camber. Or, you know, if you had a scrub plane that has a very exaggerated camber, you could use it for that too. But you can create it with a narrow, these are fairly inexpensive guides. They have a narrow wheel, so I find that I can get the camber quite easily with this. And but you can certainly do it by hand. You just have to take your time. Okay, so I've got this just about set up. I'm going to dial the mouth in a little bit, and I'm ready to show you that last thing. So we talked about planing just flat surfaces, and now I'm going to use this regular plane to plane a curved surface. This is actually one of the arms of the rocking chair, the Craftsman style rocking chair. So it gets tuned up before it gets sawn out to shape. It's got an arm almost like almost like an Adirondack chair, but that wide Craftsman arm. So I'm going to start from the top of this because the grain is going to be running favorably as I go this way and then as I go this way. So let me see if my plane is set up. Bring it out just a touch more. Now the way you plane on a surface that's convex like this is just make sure you're holding the nose down, because you're not riding on the whole plane. It's really just riding on that little bit of sole in front of the cutting edge. So I'll hold the nose down. And I want to hold it consistently down so it follows the arc of the piece. Now this works with a wider plane too. I got the mouth too low, too small for the setting. I was getting a little jammed up there. Okay. There we go. That's set pretty heavy, but This came right off the bandsaw, so it had quite a bit. Now I've got a little bit of plane tracks there. That's a new term. So I'm going to tap and check. That's good. Back it up a bit. That feels nice. So now I can just turn it around, work the other direction. So it's pretty interesting that a little plane like this can even take out the low spots, and then I would take a card scraper, which I know needs tuning up a little bit. But that fast, I've cleaned up that surface and trued it up so it feels like it flows really well. So that's another little trick you can use with your regular block planes. So we're coming to the end. Actually, I went a little over. I'm an hour here, but got carried away. I wonder if there was any other questions? We're good. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you'll check out our other videos on epicwoodworking.com. We're also on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future. Take care.